What an absolute roller coaster of a day today. The markets opened up super strong in the morning. And then as soon as, the markets opened, they just started to tumble. All right. So in today's video, we're going to go over how we gapped up so much, the overall market outlook. We're going to go over the crypto markets, the indices markets. Thank you so much for liking, commenting, and subscribing. All right. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So all three major indices opened up very high today. So we gapped up today, right? So all three of them were open up approximately 0.7%. And you can see that the SPY closed low at around 445, but then we opened at 448.70, right? The NASDAQ, we closed lower yesterday, opened up much higher. The IWM, we closed lower yesterday, opened up much higher. So overall, in the morning, the market was extremely strong, right? But in my last YouTube video, I said that the SPY looked like it can really definitely go ahead and touch 445. And on Twitter this morning, I said that, I still think the SPY goes to 445. There's too much weakness in various big name stocks. So for example, Tesla and Apple were very, very weak this morning, right? So I was like, okay, you know what? This move upward does not really make sense. It definitely looks like we're going to touch 445 soon. And we ended up going to a low today of 444.11. So that, my intuition behind that was worked out. But the next level of support that I think the SPY goes to retouch is going to be approximately 442.73. And the reason for that is because this movement right here is just very, very awkwardly weak. Like this doesn't, I'm not sure how to explain it, but this is not a strong, I mean, this purely just does not look strong, right? We had a huge red candle. We gapped up, but then we ended up closing within that red candle. We didn't break down below anything. We ended up breaking down below support, two layers of support. Yesterday's close, as well as the 23.6% fib level at 444.76. So we ended up going lower than both of those levels. So that was a very huge, this does not feel bullish. But I mean, regardless of how we feel, right? The SPY, as long as it holds above key levels of support, this could just mean that this was, this is a bull flag. We're creating some sort of a, support here, and we can bounce off of these levels and continue on higher. That is very possible. And that would mean that my feeling is just, it doesn't make any difference how I feel, right? So now we need to see whether or not the SPY can hold this level here, and then also if it can hold today's lows at 444.11. Other than that, I mean, this just does not look bullish. You can look at the MACD is very oversold. It's almost as oversold as it was back in July 19th. You can see right here, but it still has a bit lower to go. You can see that, right? Right here, you can go ahead and see this blue line. There's still more room to go, right? So that's, we still have more potential downside room. And just overall, it just does not look bullish, okay? Next, I want to look at the NASDAQ. So the NASDAQ actually looks much worse than the SPY. And you can see that the NASDAQ is starting to flatten out a bit in the RSI. Very similar to a few days ago on the IWM. So the IWM over here, the RSI was also beginning to flatten out. This is in the way. I don't know how to take that out right now. But so the RSI on the IWM was also flattening out. Let me take this out. Cool. So I took it out, and we were creating some sort of a support on the IWM here, but the RSI was flat. You can see this flat line, right? And that was a very dangerous signal because we were moving huge downwardly, but the RSI did not continue moving downward. It started to flatten out. So I thought, that was a very good opportunity for it to continue falling lower. And that's exactly what happened. And I said that this was a very, very important level of support. This trend line And where did we test? We tested exactly to that trend line, to the exact dot. And yeah, it doesn't get any better than that. That is literally a perfect touch. And the IWM did indeed continue to fall down lower. It ended up bouncing back higher, but the move did happen. But regardless, this is not a bullish reversal either. We need to see some sort of a tangible, thick candles as support here. Okay, I really do think that the IWM does fall down back lower and retests these levels. But again, I could be completely wrong, because if the IWM does break above today's highs, and then it does break above 224.11, then anything that I'm saying is just completely irrelevant. Because if you look at it right now, the MACD is very oversold. The RSI is starting to begin to move upward. So, I mean, those are bullish signals, and we did retest support and bounce back up much higher, right? So those are potential bullish signals. But I do not feel like this is going to be sustainable, and I do think that we will retest to these levels and maybe even break down below. But regardless, these levels did hold. So the two main important levels of support are going to be 220.80, 220.87, and this level here, the low today of 220.25. Other than that, let's take a look at the NASDAQ. So the NASDAQ, clearly the worst performing indice today, and it was the only indice that closed lower than yesterday's close. So you can see that the SPY did not actually close lower than yesterday's close, and the IWM did not close lower than yesterday's close. But the fact that the NASDAQ did is not a good sign. And the NASDAQ is now, the RSI is now starting to flatten out, very similar to what the IWM was doing just a few days ago. And what happened to the IWM right afterward? It really tumbled. Okay, so I think that might end up happening with the NASDAQ. We could potentially fall down lower in the NASDAQ, and I think that is entirely possible. But overall, I mean, you can see that the MACD is extremely oversold. We did hold, again, we retested this Fibonacci level, the 38.2% Fib level at 374. 374 held. So as long as we hold 374, and if this MACD starts to reverse upward and we start to break above resistance levels like this 23.6% Fib level at 377.39, then, I mean, regardless of how I feel about this RSI, it just means that the NASDAQ, this was just a good opportunity to buy into dips, that this was a bull flag formation, similar to what I showed on the SPY, and this was just a very good buying opportunity, and things would continue on higher. But because of multiple levels of weakness in the SPY, the NASDAQ, and the IWM, I think that, the market still falls just a bit lower before it starts to reverse to the upside. And especially because this Friday, it is quad witching day. So that is the day that all of the options expire. And usually when quad witching happens, you can Google that. When quad witching happens, it is usually a very volatile time. And what ends up happening is stocks tend to fall. Okay, so that is another reason why I am somewhat bearish heading into tomorrow specifically. But overall, if these levels of support hold, then regardless of what I say, completely irrelevant. Now we can take a look at the 10-year yield. The 10-year yield is actually, not really moving much. It had somewhat of a red day today. Still shows negative divergence. So we need to see if that is sustainable and if we continue going on higher. And if the 10-year yield and the dollar are doing well, then obviously that means that the IWM is going to do well. But because, it barely even moved today, it didn't have as huge of an effect as it did before, right? So there's the 10-year yield. We can take a look at the 30-year yield. Not sure what all of this stuff is. But, so the 30-year yield, we did, create some sort of a support level here. We are staying above levels of support, which is a good sign. But now what we need to see is that the MACD is now overbought. We did cross above, but yet we failed to cross above levels of resistance. And that is not a bullish sign for the 30-year yield. Okay, so if you look at the MACD on the 10-year yield, you can see that the MACD is still oversold, right? So that means that there's still potential room to the upside. But now if you look at the 30-year yield, MACD crossed above, but it did not cross above any levels of resistance, and that is not a good sign. So if the 30-year yield doesn't do well, then that means that the NASDAQ is not either going to be doing well. So the fact that the 30-year yield doesn't look too good and the NASDAQ is actually the weakest performing indice, it's making a bit of sense, right? So the dollar also did not have a huge day today. It opened up and it, was doing well into the day. But as we are getting closer to the daily close, this bull flag formation that I had drawn out before is, failing. We did break out above it, but we're looking like it's going to close below that level, right? And also, similar to the 30-year yield, the MACD is also overbought, but we failed to cross above any levels of resistance. That is not a good sign. So if the dollar and the 30-year yield are going down, then the NASDAQ goes down. So we need to see how, what this means for the NASDAQ. And if the NASDAQ does continue falling, then the SPY and the IWM will definitely begin to fall as well. So there's my analysis for the stock market and the bonds. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the crypto market. All right, so you can see that Bitcoin has been a roller coaster today as well. In my other video, I went over all of my trades for the day, and I explained why I got into Mara calls. And, I also went into detail of, Bitcoin analysis. So, number one, whenever there is a large wick on a daily candle on Bitcoin, like for example, here, or here, or here, a huge wick to the downside, like here, or literally any time in history, you could look at it here, right? When there is a huge downward wick, what ends up happening is we tend to retest 78% of that entire wick. And that's exactly what happened. We ended up breaking past the 786% level today and bounced back up higher. So now what we need to watch now on Bitcoin is where this triangle is going to end, because again, we are essentially trading within this triangle formation. And essentially we need to see two main levels. Are we going to break above 47,419 and create a support level above that? Or are we going to start to break below today's low, break below 42,900, which was September 7th low, and then come back and retest this very, very important trend line here. And this very, very important trend line has been the same trend line that we've been monitoring for quite some time, and it signaled in the log chart, it signaled this trend line right here. It signaled the downside all the way down to 30,000, right? But when you look at it on the non-log chart, it is actually currently acting as support. So I could go ahead and erase this Fibonacci level right here, clean up the chart. So now, are we going to break above this level of resistance, create some sort of a support and break on higher? Or are we going to come back and retest this level here? And the way that things are looking, it looks like we might end up falling and retesting these levels here. You can see that the MACD is starting to cross above, right? But the price of Bitcoin is not actually moving on higher, which is not a good sign at all. Okay, so because that is happening, that's actually very bearish. And the RSI is also moving lower, but the MACD is moving higher. That's not bullish at all. So most likely what's going to end up happening is we're going to go ahead and retest this trend line. But of course, I can be completely wrong. We could end up breaking this resistance up here at 47,400, and we can continue going on higher, but it doesn't look like that's what's going to end up happening. I would wait, and I would be much more patient and look for buys between 40 to 42,000 essentially. Yeah, so there's my analysis on Bitcoin. Let's take a look at Ethereum. So Ethereum, very similar. We broke down below the triangle as well. We didn't move on higher as much as Bitcoin did, so that's not a good sign. And again, we did retest at least 78% of this huge wick. And you can also see the MACD moving higher, but the RSI moving lower. That is not bullish again. And this is a huge bear flag formation. It looks like the bear flag is breaking down to the downside. So on Ethereum, I would also wait for around 3,000 or sub 3,000 to buy in for trades. So overall, the crypto market does not look too great. So depending on whether or not Bitcoin can trade above 47.5 and whether or not Ethereum can start trading above 35.68, those are the two main levels of resistance for each crypto. And we just need to see how they respond around those levels. All right. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I will see you guys tomorrow. Thank you.